Okay, so um, when you're into bushcrafting and such, you tend to save a lot of things that most people would think is strange. So, again, I don't live on a farm. I don't live on an acreage, and I don't really hunt that regularly. And I have used and collected roadkill as well. And that's always an option, but if it's too dead, I don't mess with it. It's got to be fresh if it's going to be roadkill, and you can tell whether it's fresh or not. But oftentimes you go to the store, you make some food, like a duck or turkey, chicken, and you can use the whole animal. You can use the bones for different projects, and so this is kind of what I have. I have a few bags of bones from different stuff, meals, food. I have beef bones, I got pork bones, I got duck, goose, I got chicken, so and it's just for different projects that one can use to keep completely primitive, right? So that you don't get into the mindset of when you actually do have to harvest an animal of discarding necessary opportunistic resources from that animal, like its skin, the stomach, the sinew, or meaning the tendon, the bones, shells and things like that. I have a bag of shells, and you get oysters from time to time, or you go to Red Lobster or whatever and you order this and that. And I think sometimes I keep these things and tell them to bag them up because I know I can use them in different projects that I may be working on, right? I don't live anywhere near the ocean, so it's nice to be able to have some oyster shells to work with for varying projects. So anyways, if you are, more or less homebound like I am, because I live in an apartment complex right now, collect certain things if you want to practice these things, so that when it's not foreign to you in a emergency situation or in a real situation. So I'm just gonna kind of keep that real. So we have different parts of the bone, different parts of the anatomy. We have some, what does this look like? This looks like the humerus. Your humerus is this part here, the big part that holds your bicep and your tricep. And it looks like we have a radii and ulna, and that's in your forearm. So in a chicken wing, you have the humerus and you have the radii and the ulna. The ulna is, I believe, the big bone. That's the one that's connected to your thumb here, and the ulna, the radii is the smaller bone. And what that does is they work together, and along with your musculature, they're like this, straight up and down, but they will kind of spin on each other a little bit, and so you can rotate. Right? If I have that correctly, again, somebody who's got their anatomy down, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ulna or the radii, the ulna is the stable one, and the radii is the one that goes around or pivots around. Thus, the term radius. Anyways, these are the bones we're going to use, and they're hollow. Bird bones tend to be hollow, so they tend to be pretty cool to work with. You can use cow bones, you can use pork bones, you can use pretty much the bones. There's the scapula, there's the femurs, there's the rib bones, there's vertebrae, sternum, the hip bones. There's just all these different types of bones that you can use. Patellas, which is your kneecap, so on and so forth. I won't get too far deep into it. From a martial arts standpoint, it's very important to know your anatomy. And I know my anatomy a little bit. So anyways, we're gonna focus on one of these, and I'm gonna choose this ulna here, and I'm gonna take a rock that I have. I usually use for flint knapping for this demonstration, just to see if we can break this in a way that we can get what we need, right? So I want to create an awl. So really all I need is to kind of break this into a shard where I kind of have a handle, and I can kind of abrade a tip to this, right? So I notice this is flat on one side, and it's more it's flat on one side, so when you rotate it, the one edge sticks up, and so we want to kind of break this in a way so that it doesn't completely shatter. I have plenty of bones that this doesn't work, but I think what works for this is to just break it on the side and with the closer to the knob, right? So I can just take my bone here. There we go, and that might work for us. So this is what we shattered, right? So this can be a piece that we could use, and it's almost fashioned perfectly, right? Or we could use this piece here, right? But then the thing is it's got a curve to it, so we can kind of use it this way, or we can use it this way, which might actually be convenient. So I think we're going to work with this piece a little bit, and we'll set this piece aside for another project. And what comes out of the middle usually is the marrow. When you're cooking in a survival situation, you want all the goodness, and marrow is a very good source of protein. So oftentimes, you'd break your bones after cooking or roasting, boiling your food. You would break open the bones so that you could get out the marrow, because it's a very good source of protein. You need that caloric input when you're in a survival situation. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this shard here, and I'm gonna put that in there for later use. Just for cleanliness, I'm gonna put that in there. And now we're gonna just work on this piece here. And with this piece here, what I'm concerned about is we have a little bit of the knob here. I'm gonna see if I can just pop that off. Yep, there it went. So it felt like I could do so. Let's pop that off. And so now we have this going on. So I want to try to make this as flat as possible and sand stuff down. And really all it is sanding. I can take this and maybe even take the shard that we had before, use that as a tool to extract all this marrow that we don't really need, like so. There's some breakage there, so yeah, this may break in a way that I think this will work for us, so that's cool. So yeah, we're gonna work with this piece, but it gives us another shard for another piece. Maybe I make a gorge hook out of this smaller piece or something like that, right? So really what you do is you're just going to take your bone piece. That's why I have the tarp down, so I'm going to tarp down here so I can just take the shards and things and not have them on the carpet. So basically I'm just going to take and spend my energy, and what I like to do is I like to take my sandpaper and I like to have my hand off of the edge so I can get level with whatever I'm sanding. So just as a trick, so I'm not always sanding at an angle, right? And so I can grab this and I'm just going to sand this. Alright, so here's a piece that I had been working on previously, and this is not the oh no, this is really from Arrowheads, so it's actually thinner, and I've sanded it down to a shape that I'm almost happy with, and I just want to take this and kind of refine it a little bit more. And again, as I'm sanding, I'm rotating a little bit, right? So you can go in circular motions like this, you can go vertical motions like this, horizontal motions, to get the shape that you want. And again, in a wild situation or survival situation, you're looking for rough rock. Like for example, this is pretty smooth, but just for an example, and I do excuse me, I do use this for flint knapping, and that's why it's kind of smooth, but I could do the same thing on this. Just as an example, it would just take longer because it's pretty smooth. But you want to find some sort of rock or rough surface. The sand would work too, on a hard surface, just to abrade, to shape your tool. Right? I'm using a circular motion because I'm trying to refine this point. I'm checking periodically. What I'm working towards is trying to make myself afraid of this point. Again, you can make fishing hooks and trap parts, arrowheads, spear tips, and in the process of making it, once you get to a point where you're actually afraid of the tip, then you know it'll work. That means it's got to be freaking sharp. And you're just slowly working down that tip. And notice what I'm not doing, okay, for this project, for an awl. I've sanded down one side, and that's the marrow there. We can get rid of that later. But I'm not sanding the back side. I want a strong tip, because the purpose of this is to poke through birch bark. So I want a pretty strong tip. I'm only sharpening like one side. I'm not going to the back. And sanding, you can use hard pressure to take off more material. You can use lighter pressure to refine edges and tips and things like that. So and again, I remember, you know, growing up, I was always wanting to make bows and arrows, and I could take a stick and strip it down, take the bark off of it, and be on my grandmother's porch, and you know, I could sand pretty much anything to a tip, and I thought it was just so cool to be able to do that. Then I'd make these little bows out of these little twigs and find a piece of string. I was always asking for string, some twine, and it might work once, but then, you know, it would go boink, and then the arrow would just go boink, you know, just fall down, and then the bow would break. So it was like, I had to commit myself to going to the library to actually figure out how to make bows, which I didn't really learn until much later in life. But I've always been able to make a sharp point by abrading stuff on a rough surface. So this brings back a lot of memories. So at any rate, I'm just refining this tip. Alright, and this is getting there. This is getting there, okay? It's looking pretty sharp. All right, and I think it may work for us. And I don't have like a smaller piece of birch bark, and I have some sheets that will have to be I'll have to reconstitute them. But I do have, you know, my little project that I made some years ago, and I just use this kind of as a testing subject, and I can take this and find a space and see if I can drill a hole. And you know, real up close here, this is where I've done some practice here, right? And all I would do is stitch it. There's 2 holes here that has, you know, that's holding stitching there. When we get to actually making this bowl, I'll go through the process, but right now I need to test to make sure that my awl is going to be able to go through the material that I'm looking for, that I'm trying to work with. So I'm going to just take this and go next to this hole here. Maybe this, you can see it, and I want to take this and make sure this just doesn't break, right? And I want to make sure that it is sharp enough, and all you're doing is you're just going back and forth, you know, in a circular fashion until you get through to the other side, right? And I can look through here. Nope, not there yet. Yep, I'm broken through the other side, and I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to see if the camera will pick it up, but maybe you can see it. I'm at the other side, right? And yeah, I can see light through there. So this tool is ready to basically work for us. So now I want to attach a lanyard very similar to this piece here. They're very similar, and I'm just going to use some sinew and a piece of buckskin. I'll see if I can find a piece of ulna from a chicken wing that will serve as the cinch. We'll call it a cinch, to basically reproduce this awl here. So, and again, I just have a piece of cork that I stick this in so that it's safe and protects my tip. But that's essentially it. Working with bone is actually really easy, and bones are kind of everywhere, you know. And again, if you're not a hunter, and you know, you're interested in bushcrafting skills and that sort of thing, and you work in a kitchen somewhere, and you know they're just about to throw all these beef bones and all this other kind of stuff, there's some really cool stuff that you can be made with bone. It's durable, it's hard, it can be brittle, but that's also a character or quality that you may want or need, right? It's easier to work with than shell, much easier to work with than stone, and much more durable than wood, right? You can take a piece of bone and, you know, burrow into a piece of wood. I would say, you know, if birch bark is the kind of the Tupperware of survival, then bone is kind of like your plastic, your hard plastic of survival, I would have to say. So that would be the analogy I would use. But anyways, just real quick and dirty, just from a conceptual level, you just have a bone, you break it or abrade it and shape it how you need to shape on something abrasive, and you have a new tool. And then right now we're just going to embellish this so that it's actually more useful and handy when we actually use it. But I'm also showing some other skills as well.